Are you ever sitting in a room listening to a public speaker and thinking to yourself, man, I wish they had better skills? This is episode 27 of The Confident Performer, all about public speaking with my favorite public speaker, Ted King. Welcome to The Confident Performer, the only podcast that guides ambitious, driven performers and entrepreneurs to show up authentically and confidently, both on and off stage. If you are ready to make an impact in your life and community and start living your most amazing, empowered life, you are in the right place. You already have what it takes to make it. You just need to see it. And I'm here to show you how. You ready? Let's go. Okay, so here we are. I selected you to be a partner with me on this because you truly are one of my favorite public speakers. And your voice has this delicious warmth that grabs you. You feel it down inside of your guts. It's funny. I just finished this book by Colleen Hoover. It Ends With Us, a movie coming out August 9th. So excited. And she talks in that book about voices grabbing you, getting inside of your body. And you should not be falling asleep right now. I had to tell Emery this last week. You know what? Maybe I'm the problem. Okay. But we're going to talk about some techniques, some tips, some tools, some things that stand out for us personally, and things that we love to think about individually as we are public speaking and ways that we like to help others. Okay. First and foremost, say hello.
Hi.
Hi. How are you?
Oh, I'm so good. It's very hot. Right now.
It is very hot.
It's 110 outside. It's not 110. It is 110 outside, and it is miserable.
Yeah, and you golfed today, too.
I did golf today.
So you felt it even more, obviously.
Yeah. Well,
you look like you're wearing a parka, you're wearing so many clothes.
I'm literally wearing a Hawaiian shirt and some hiking pants.
I don't know, that feels like a parka in this weather.
Well.
I'm not wearing a halter top, but it's one of those things, it does... I would wear less clothes if I were you, or smaller clothes if I were you.
All right.
Start today with smaller clothes. Okay. So I do want to talk about really quick. I know you had some adventures, and I was referencing your adventures on the podcast. You went and you hiked, 16 million miles or something like that. And you had your friends with you. Where were you? What were you doing? And what were you doing it for?
Yeah, so we just finished the annual Honor Hike, which is put on each year by the Honor Hike Foundation. And I'm lucky enough to be able to work with those guys. I had to apply to be a hiker with them. They don't just accept anybody. And so I was lucky enough to get in there. And anyway, so we just got back it was in Virginia this year. So it's on the Appalachian Trail. And every year we pick up from the point that we left off the year previously, or the team did. I didn't start this with them from the very beginning. Back in Georgia is where it starts, the southern start point or terminus, whichever. I got in there the third year that they started doing it. So I started in North Carolina a few years back, and then we did all of North Carolina, Tennessee, and we ended in Damascus, Virginia last year. So that's where we started this year, and we did probably about 55 miles each out of Damascus. So we're somewhere in the mountains up there at a road crossing is where we'll start again next year. But the point of the foundation is to bring awareness and attention to officers who have been killed in the line of duty. So, or a duty related death. So COVID would count for something like that. So we take dog tags with us. There's a dog tag for each officer who was killed the year prior. And we do 1 mile for each of those officers. And then at the end of the event, those dog tags are sent back to either the jurisdiction that the officer worked or to the family if we have that contact information.
Oh, wonderful.
The foundation itself does more than that. That's their kind of big event for the year. But they raise money to provide support for family members of those who have been lost. Sometimes they'll, provide support for small agencies that can't afford bulletproof vests and things like that. So they'll get them actual supplies if they can raise enough money for that sort of thing. But they're always looking for things to support, and they're always looking for donations to come in and that sort of thing. So
I love that.
honorhikefoundation.org. You can get more information, and you can follow them on all the social medias. And the president, Jeff Paul, and the vice president, Jeremy Grimes, are both two very good people, and they really have a heart for this stuff. So it's a pretty good group.
Yeah, it was really fun this year. I think there was more of a social media presence, which I was very grateful for, because that is one of those events I love to let you just go and do your thing and be in your own headspace and all the bits. And so to be able to, watch part of your journey and them do a little bit of the behind the scenes action, when you had your on-site, little surgery happen there, that was
I did have to remove my own toenail. There's no pleasant way to say it. It was gross. It was not comfortable. I'm recovering now.
So sexy.
Yeah.
I'm so glad that happened, that you're able to share that story and,
It's all about performance.
High performance technique.
Yeah.
So, I think in essence, it really is. Sometimes there are those things you have to do what you have to do. And at the end of the day, you are committed to going a certain distance and finishing that distance and not letting your team down. And that's kind of what we talked about last week with Emery when she was on the show. And it was certainly one of those important focuses where it is, you are a part of a team, you've committed to something, and then at the end of the day, they are counting on you to perform your part. And that's the same with anything, with any of your shows that you're in, any of, any play, any track, I love the world of the swing, where they're the person on tour that learns literally every single track, and they learn every single part, and they could go in at a moment's notice, and it's incredible to watch them adjust to the circumstances of whatever gets thrown their way. So even if you have to cut off a toenail and keep on walking, it's really, really impressive to me.
Yeah, I think that there's a lot of similarities with performance, regardless of topic or category, right? They're just lessons to be learned, and, stick-to-itness that, comes with being able to set a goal and saying, I'm going to get there. The show must go on, right?
Yeah, for sure.
If we're a toenail light at the end, that's all right. It's just less weight to carry.
Get your fitness on, lose a toenail. Yeah, no, I love that. But it's very impressive to me. So I thank you for that share. Now I want to dig into this topic of public speaking. For one, because it is so out there and inundated in our feeds, where people are selling their coaching, they are selling their product. And we've really kind of, I think, in my opinion, crossed over this line from media to social media being a main platform where you're getting your information. And so many people feel that they may have all the high experience in public speaking, but they don't have a lot of the foundational components, in my opinion. And sometimes the message is lost in translation of people's habits or similar things that they say off and on or consistently. And I find that even when I listen back to my own stuff, I will say oftentimes where it's I kind of just talk like that in real life though. So it's a habit of mine. And because I speak often and because I speak in front of people often, I use that phrasing. So when you are watching people, and I want to dig in and I want to get, for myself, I'm going to get kind of muddy on things that I really want to see in my performers and my speakers. And for you, I'd love for you to just share what you think makes a really great public speaker and what you think some of those things that are really important in driving home a point, especially if you have people's attention for a limited amount of time.
Sounds great.
So start now. Let's do it. Let's go. Okay. So first and foremost, what are some of your favorite things when you watch public speakers?
I like it when people have something to say, not just speak, right? So I don't like the word salad. I don't like a lot of unnecessary words or made up words, or it's not really a pet peeve because I find it humorous, but people using the wrong words or words in the wrong context, I think is just one of those things where, and I know you know what I'm talking about because we'll often look at each other and kind of giggle like, that does not mean what that person thinks it means.
Or irregardless.
Irregardless is a pet peeve. Height.
Height.
Height is another fun word that I don't think really exists.
With the G, what is it? The GTH? Would it be height? Yeah.
But anyway, like I said, and I'm by no means an English major or anything like that. But
important. I hear that one so often when people say important.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I feel we should honor that T. I think that T is important. There's a lot of that
these days, like pitcher.
Yeah, pitcher.
Instead of picture or mountain.
Yeah.
Going to the mountains. But either way, like, and there's some, regional dialects, I think that, are more likely to use some of those words than others. So it's not really, anybody's fault, but it's just one of those things that we pick up on. So
absolutely.
Anyway, but the point is, I like it when a message is conveyed, and that message should start with, a lead up, just like a story, right? It's going to have a little bit of an introduction or warm up or why it is that I should be listening to this person anyway. And then they get across their information that they intended to get across. And then they end not necessarily abruptly, but they come to some sort of reasonable conclusion, and it's great. And there's differences in the public speaking and in the intent of what the format is, I suppose, where, sometimes people are talking about performance, right? So if you're a performer, then you're going to have to go public speak, or speak publicly at auditions or in plays or, concerts. Like, it's all sorts of public speaking, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
I think, whereas that's more your cup of tea, I end up going to a lot of conferences and speaking at those. So there's, going there and listening to experts or listening to people on a panel or even like a person of interest. One of my toughest public speaking sessions was being a best man at one of our friends' weddings, and we're in another country.
You did amazing.
I'm just coming up with a speech off the hip. I wish I would have put more time into it. I spoke from the heart, but I don't know that that I really conveyed what I intended to because I didn't think about it ahead of time. I thought that I would have to do it. And I thought, well, I know how to talk and I'm relatively experienced at public speaking. I didn't package my message in an efficient way or, one that was going to guarantee the results in communication that I wanted, So I hope that it was received well. And I think everybody had a couple cocktails. So I don't know that anybody even remembers it. But point is, it was one of those times where I was just ill prepared or not as prepared as I would have liked to have been.
Well, what that brings to mind where you think about that realm of being ready or being prepared right off the hip, doing your thing, deciding, hey, I know how to talk. I love this person. So happy to be sharing this moment with him and his people and his chosen people. And I think about how much of that emotion actually gets in the way of you feeling like you actually were able to drive an efficient point home in that manner, where it's like you are speaking and you're speaking from the heart. The message is very direct and it's not word salad. How much of your own maybe personal emotion got in the way of that? I am going to ask you this because I want to lead into something else.
Yeah, I think that I'm very self-critical, so there's a lot of that too, where I tend to look at things not like, hey, I really knocked that out. But, even when I have done a decent job, I look at it like, oh, I could have been better at this or that. And that is my own mindset and how I approach things. So, So for me in my line of work, that works. I'm not a performer. I'm not somebody who's out there in the limelight a lot. I'm somebody that's on a team quite a bit. And so with that emphasis of values and the results that are expected on the types of teams that I work with, that tends to work for me. And it tends to, I think, make a good teammate. But I'm generally not the person like yourself that would be out singing a solo on a stage, and so I don't know. I'm again kind of missing the bullseye on this topic, I think. But the point is, I think there's a couple different ways to look at it and how you prepare and how you self-critique afterward. There's probably a couple ways to do it, and my way is just one of them.
Yeah, I love it. And I love, though, that, you are so good at preparing and so good at running through, creating an outline in, very little time. And I know that works for the brain and for your brain. And for me, I say, oh yeah, I'm definitely like, I'm fine. I'll be able to speak, right off the cuff, but absolutely having an outline is so huge so that when that emotion does creep in as person, as a performer, as someone sharing their message or a story, or public speaking as a best man in a very heightened emotional state, I think having that prepared statement absolutely would have potentially enhanced the quality of what you felt you laid out. And, you noticing that is one thing. But then, in my opinion, I think the moment of you being organic and your wonderful, beautiful self, I don't think you can beat that.
Well, thanks.
Well, you're welcome.
Yeah, no, I know what you mean. And there's, obviously, we don't always speak to a script. So there's a lot of times where things are kind of off the hip. But I guess when I was scribbling down some notes for this in the 5 minutes that I had to prepare, the vision that I had for public speaking is somebody standing in front of a group of people and speaking.
Right.
And so I think that for me, when I have to do that, having things to say and making sure that I've talked about them in a logical and a reasonable transition makes the most sense to me. Those are the type of speakers that I like listening to. So I like sounding like I've prepared myself and having something to say that, is on point for whatever the topic is. And it's a little bit different too. So like I've had a lot of time of testifying in court. It's a little different than public speaking, but you still have a bunch of people staring at you waiting for your answer. And your answer counts because it means the difference between somebody going to prison and somebody walking free.
Right.
And there is a good balance in there, and you got to be good at both. I think that being good at one is not a complete package for a public speaker. You should be able to read the room and be able to talk on topics that are on point for whatever the engagement is.
Yeah, absolutely.
And you're really good at that. You're really good at speaking. When I've seen you speak at conferences and things like that, you're able to convey your story very well. You're able to talk on the topics that are presented really well, and you articulate yourself really well, and you have a solid vocabulary, so it comes across very well when you speak.
Very nice.
I think that the people that are successful at public speaking have those attributes, whereas you take that to social media and you can see some people that are great, people that are absolutely hilarious.
Right. And incredible.
Right. And talented and everything else. But you see a lot of people that they are talking and they are the biggest star in their own mind. Right. And it's rough to watch sometimes.
Yeah. I think that's where the message gets lost. And to really, really focus and dig in, like I said, get muddy on this. For me, when I'm sitting there, and what I've noticed, because there is such a massive intensity and focus on women in the industry now, and women in coaching, and women groups and all the things, so many women get together and they have all different voices, all different types of voices. But the fun part is that when you actually are at a conference with multiple women, you see the different styles and you have a gravitational pull to people who are more direct, who are very, very clear and precise in their conversational skills and the type of energy that they bring, where they feel very confident, and not the delusional confidence that, like you said, is like they're the ultimate biggest star in their own mind, but absolutely knows their challenges, potential faults, and things that they're actually actively working on and sharing with the group. And I think that comes across as a more intimate share, and people buy into that. But I want to dig into this. The sound of someone's voice, does that make a difference when you are hearing someone's message?
Yes. I don't think that it's the biggest determining factor in whether or not I'm interested in listening to somebody, but
are you sure? You
can only listen to Fran Drescher for so long, right? I say that. She's hilarious.
She is hilarious.
I'm actually a big fan, or Gilbert Gottfried, right? It's just, like there's stuff like that, and it's kind of their shtick or whatever, right. But yeah, the tone, I've never once considered tone of voice until you brought it up.
Yeah.
So, I say that I can definitely hear, you hear people on the radio, right, that have a voice for radio, and they sound great, or you hear different singers and they sound more powerful if they've got this type of voice or that type of voice, depending on what they're doing. But I wouldn't say it's a big determining factor for me, but I definitely like listening to people with, strong voice. I wouldn't say it's necessarily a certain pitch or anything like that, but people that are confident, I think it is another aspect of that. It's not quite what you've asked, but I think that
so please stay on topic, or you're gonna get kicked off the show. Like I told Emery, if she's not dynamic.
I think that with the confidence comes, just kind of an air of one, credibility, but two, interest. Right? You like listening to somebody that's passionate about what they're talking about. That's, depending on the topic. I mean, vulnerability and emotion and how you convey that is relevant sometimes. Sometimes it's not. If you're talking to a bunch of experts, then it's less important, then your facts and your figures are a little bit more important. But in general, I think that, if somebody's calm and cool and collected, they tend to present fairly well.
Yeah. There's this activation in the vocal fry that happens when people are nervous. And this kind of like intermittent speak of this, their voice sounds dry and they feel like they're not supporting their breath. And it's like in and out, this vocal fry sound. That's one I cannot sustainably listen to. So if I hear that and that is about 5 seconds of that, then my brain has to turn off for a safety mechanism, just for, my own sanity. But then there are some of those like compressed larynx sounds. So like when you're talking ultra high in the nose, and we have friends that talk like that, but that kind of compressed larynx and then that kind of pushed nasality, that's tough to listen to. And I actually love the study that was done where they talked about the aspect of a woman even speaking to a group of men coming in, if her voice is like a relative tone or timbre and resonance that's similar to their wives or their mothers or their partners, that their brains actually tune them out.
I would say you sound like my mom right now. Just kidding.
Them's are fighting words.
No, I think that as you mentioned that, one thing that I've noticed, and I notice it more with women than with men, but I've seen it with both or heard it with both, I suppose, is ending every sentence like a question.
Yes. Oh, I can't with that.
And that is one thing that I think, one, it comes across like you don't know exactly what you're saying, or your expertise might not be centered squarely on your topic.
Yeah.
But two, I think it's, especially with, again, social media and just everybody being able to be their own star and putting it out to the world, there are a lot of folks that I don't think realize how poorly that comes across.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think finding a way to drive a point home without asking a question in your statement absolutely is helpful.
Right.
Right.
Yeah, that sounds horrible. But I don't know if it's become a trend.
It is a trend.
Or if it's just a tendency, but it is something that I've noticed quite a bit. And again, I've noticed it more with women than with men, but I've heard it with both for sure. And I don't know I don't know what the origin of that is.
Yeah.
But in general, speaking confidently and speaking like a normal, like you would read a book or something like that, I think just comes across a little bit better. And there's no problem with showing emotion or speaking passionately on things. But if we don't pick ourselves apart or listen to ourselves and critique ourselves, then you're not going to improve. And if you're not interested in improving, that's one thing. But if you're listening to this podcast, you're probably interested in improving.
Absolutely.
And being the top performer that you can. And if that's one of the things that is your tendency or your technique, or it's just a habit, then it's probably something to take a look at. Right?
Yeah.
And there's lots of those things. I say right a lot, or I say, do you understand quite a bit,
or makes sense.
Or makes sense, right. And that's because a lot of times I'm in front of people that I'm speaking about a concept that I need them to understand so that we can go take care of. Each of them has a part to play in that overall concept. Mm-hmm. And I need them to do it. And I need to make sure that they understand. Sometimes that's annoying to listen to. I've noticed it a lot. If I've listened to myself or I've watched a video of myself or something and I catch myself saying right, just like somebody else would say, or I throw right on the end of a bunch of sentences, as though I'm needing that person to agree with me before I can move on.
Right.
Right.
Yeah. So if I were to say after every time you said right, I think that would give you
You sound like my mom again.
Somehow you tuned me out completely. No, but I thought that was interesting. So, for example, that one gal, I can't even remember her name, but she was creating this new medical kind of like, I don't know, spearheading this medical technology thing that was just a hoax, that was basically like not a real thing. And she ended up talking lower like this. And so she gradually adopted this voice and persona and continued to talk to all of the men in the room like that. She has blonde hair. I can remember what her mugshot looked like, but I think that's all that really matters.
Yeah, I'm not familiar with that one.
Yeah,
but.
it's very interesting. I'll show it to you later. But that information, as far as like the tone and the timbre of the voice, I think is so important for each artist to really focus on sharing their message in a practiced mechanism, but not really becoming over practiced so that they forget what they're actually talking about. And what do you think about the speakers, the artists, the people that you've heard, that you know good and well? They have practiced the same speech 500 times, and now they're doing it to me. Do you take the message like, wow, that was impressive? Or are you like, do they even know what they're doing? Or is it a total autopilot thing? Because for me, again, that's another one of those things. My brain will turn that off. It will begin to sound like white noise to me.
Yeah, I think that, where my brain goes as you're talking about that is some off the cuff addresses, that different folks throughout organizations would provide, right? So think of somebody, the boss, the supervisor, the CEO of whatever, speaking to the people. Mm-hmm. And there are a lot of times where as you're, again, it's not necessarily performance, but as you're in that leadership position, you're speaking to your subordinates. There's a lot of opportunities for off the cuff or off the hip speaking, right? And stuff that I've seen where it's very almost canned, there's not a lot of emotion. It's the same message over and over and over again. It really just is, the equivalent of, patting a child on the head, right? And for me personally, that does not resonate with me. Right. Some people need a little bit more of that than others, and there's nothing wrong with that. But for me personally, I find it a little bit insulting to have this exact same, rainbows and sunshine shoved down my throat and patted on the head like that. Now, I say that there's a good balance in there about, a leader that's absent, right? And does not make any of those appearances, right? And so we can go down rabbit holes on that as well. But in general, I think that the people who show up and use fun, glittery words, it just doesn't really stick with me all that much, and I say that like I'm not a performer like you're a performer. So there's a lot more opportunity, or at least I would assume that there's a lot more opportunity for people who are giving a performance to go in and have to be a specific way for this, character, that character, or this role or that role. Mm-hmm. And flexibility that they would need to go between those. I think one is it's something that you would have to know ahead of time, like with your goal for that particular role and all the skills that are required of that goal, mm-hmm. where you're going to work to improve yourself for this particular role, that particular goal. And that's where somebody like you would come in and coach them through, once those, probably help them identify those skills, but then coach them through how to be better at that stuff.
Right. Yeah, so, absolutely.
With me, it's, I kind of have this framework and all that, just refer to it here where whenever I'm speaking in public, if I have a goal of wanting to convey whatever the topic is, right? If I want to come across, like I said earlier, as an expert, or if I want to come across as somebody who's trying to motivate others to do a thing. So there's the goal. Now I look at my skills, especially if I have time to prepare. Do I have the skills to make that happen? Do I have the time to make that happen? Do I have, is my vocabulary on point? Am I informed as to what the topics are or what the issues are, in that particular segment of teamwork or, mm-hmm. or whatever it is? Do I have an audience? I can have all the right things to say, but if I don't have anybody to say it to, then, is that going to help me accomplish my goal or not?
Yeah.
And then it comes down to showtime, right? Where I've identified my goal. I know what skills I have to be competent in to reach that goal. I've worked on those skills and I'm putting them all together and now it's showtime. I think that, again, for me, I have to remember to breathe, right? I tend to speak a little louder because I feel like it makes me come across. It gets some of those jitters out a little bit more quickly if I speak louder. Not yelling, but just speaking clearly. I have an opportunity to write a lot of my addresses or my speeches, right? So a little bit different than somebody who has to memorize it. I do a couple little trick things, for myself that help where, say, I'm standing up behind a pulpit and I'm, addressing, whoever the group is. I will read with my finger like a child through my speech, but that's on purpose so that I can stop my finger when I'm done, when I'm not reading, and I can look up and make eye contact, and then I can come back and not miss my spot and get, choked up on which sentence I'm on or, get all confused. So I read with a finger or pen or something like that to keep my spot where it was that I was reading. I do like to make eye contact quite a bit when I'm speaking because I think it comes across a little bit better than somebody who just stares down at their paper. And I like to scan the room. There's not one person in particular that I'm trying to look at usually if it's a general speech or something like that. But it's something where I want to make sure that I'm looking left, I'm looking right, and I'm smiling, and and it's something that I'm aware of how I'm coming across and what I look like up there, and not just because I want to perform well, but because I know that in general they have an expectation of me being the person who's either in charge or is providing some sort of information or is a subject matter expert on a investigation or something like that. And so I want to look professional. I want to make sure that I come across as somebody who's credible and informed and articulate and all those things. And then after that, I want to recap, right? So whether it's testifying in court or it's providing a speech or it's talking to the team, I generally find a way to find somebody that is trusted to say, hey, how did that come across? Or how did that land with the team? I don't generally ask them, how did my speech go?
Amazing. You were right. Breathtaking.
How was my voice on this? I don't ask that. I just say, hey, did I meet my goal? The goal that I set at the very beginning of this, did the words that I used to convey whatever the information on the topic, did that land with the audience like I needed it to? Sometimes it does. At this point, I've been doing it quite a bit. So I think in general it does. But there's other times where I'm a little bit surprised. And sometimes it's kind of a hit to the ego too, when somebody's like, hey, I don't think you communicated what you think you communicated.
Oh.
And then it's a little bit of a, butterflies in the stomach, like, oh crap, I was hoping to do really well. I felt pretty confident in that. Or I'll watch it on video and I'll say, man, I didn't realize that I was looking up at the ceiling, for my words, right?
Oh,
or I'm trying to come up with an answer where I was looking around, or maybe I mumbled on a particular answer or a topic or a section or something like that. Or maybe I wasn't close enough to the microphone. And so my voice didn't resonate loudly enough to the people in the back.
Yes.
And so there's things like that I've caught myself on after the fact. And that's okay. It's a learning lesson. So then you just think, well, these are the things that I didn't do well last time. So next time I'm going to prepare better for that.
Right.
I'm going to add that to the skills that I know that I need to meet my goal. And so as I work to prepare for the next one with the next goal in mind, the skills I've selected to be good at and necessary to meet that goal, I'm just going to make sure that these things are added in.
Yeah, absolutely. And I love that. So I love, again, how you break everything down is always so magical to me. And when I think of first things first, my first thing when you're walking up and you are going to be the speaker for the next 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 25 minutes, or an hour, you going up and taking the microphone, whatever the microphone situation is, and you opting to massively be in control of that. Like, listen, people, especially if you have, 5 to 1,000 people sitting in front of you, hearing a message, and you have to use a microphone, that you truly master the mic. That for me is so important. So you touching on that is so important. Again, your voice, your vocal tone and resonance and timbre and gorgeous, gorgeous, always very easy to listen to. But if you are not if you're hit and miss all over the place with the microphone, you don't get to hear the tone. You don't get to hear the timbre. You don't get to hear the beautiful intonation when you go deep into your chest resonance. You don't get to hear the warmth that you have in your mouth if you are not amplified appropriately. And I think those are the things that so many people miss. Those are the things that I love coaching on. So when you think about starting your career and you think to yourself, hey, I'm a performer, or I am a coach and I am going to be consistently performing as a public speaker, that is something I want to actively push in what I do. I love working with people who are speaking in public. I love it. It's my favorite. So those types of things, those nuances that I explain, obviously you're not thinking when you go to sleep, oh, I wonder if my intonation was, on point as it could have been today. I know you're not thinking of that, but overall, those are the things that I want to buff out, iron out, and really kind of add flair to with people so that I don't have to be subjected to the pain of crappy intonation.
Yeah. Listening to somebody that is all over the place, or like you said, it's taken me a long time to get used to having a microphone. Usually the microphone is set, right? It's in one spot. And so as long as I keep my head in the same spot, I'm okay. However, there are a number of places that through the consulting business, if we have to go and present a class, to a group of people, what the audiovisual looks like at that particular location varies widely. And so getting used to carrying a microphone is one thing, and making sure that I'm holding it up to my mouth, but not too close, because you don't want to bump it. And, you don't want to have that scratchy or too close kind of sound to the to the microphone.
The pops.
Or
the extra pops.
Another thing that I know you're really good at when you're setting up equipment, you and your team, is making sure that your stuff works, because there's probably, in my mind, very few things that are more distracting than a microphone popping or getting close to the speaker, and now you have that feedback. And I've seen a number of folks that don't get it. And it doesn't matter how good they are at that point. If they're not self-aware and they're not environmentally aware, and their equipment is, it's popping or it's cutting out or it's, any of that stuff, it is getting in the way of their message for sure.
Yes. And to that point, that is my biggest thing. When your focus is on what is disrupting or disturbing the conscious mind from sitting there listening to someone new speak in front of you, what is interrupting the message from the medium? And I always think of the person that is sending the message as the medium. So the medium is the translator of the information and what you are actually getting, how you are going to adhere it to your life, enhance it, whatever you choose to do with it. But if the medium is disrupted, I worked with an artist that kind of sang something, and I said, okay, hey, I'm going to want you to do this, and then I'm going to want you to speak over enunciate, then I want you to speak through it. And her first instinct was to say, I had a speech impediment when I was a kid. And I said, I know, I can already hear it. I can still hear it. What I'm going to want you to do is you're going to work past it. We're going to speak past it. And the exercise mechanisms of speaking past that and requiring yourself to do something that the body is typically not used to doing, because your body has been almost subjected to that subliminal messaging of, this is how we talk. This is how we're going to walk around talking. This is how we say our R's and our T's and all that. I think it's so important that interrupting that mental block that says, you're not really good at this or you're not really good at that, so that you can really clean up how your messaging comes across, because you are the medium for the message in that moment. How important do you think that is?
I definitely think, speaking specifically of mental blocks, so many people say, I'm not good at public speaking because they don't like it. Being good at it and liking it or not liking it are different things.
Yes.
The people that talk themselves out of being good because they don't want to stand up there and have everybody looking at them because it's uncomfortable, right? Until you get used to it. Those folks tend to have the biggest problem, and they avoid it at all costs. And they generally don't get any better at it because they avoid it so much.
Right.
So I think that, as somebody who's an introvert. I don't like being up in front of people a lot. But again, we talked about this on the last time you had me on here. I've come to understand that it's my role a lot of times, though. And then I guess one of those things where I would recommend people, again, just prepare. You know what your goal is, know what the skills are that are requisite of that goal, and practice those things. I would not get, as far as recommendations, don't get worried about how long you have to talk, right? Like people, we got to do a 5-minute presentation. Like 5 minutes is nothing.
No, it's
right? Like anybody can talk for 5 minutes.
Yeah.
For me, it's going through and organizing what I have to say and structuring it, decently to where I've got enough to talk about for that amount of time. If I have to just talk off the hip, then it's a little less.
You got some sexy hips, boys.
It's a little less smooth, I think. But if it's something that I've been able to prepare for, which again, with public speaking, a lot of times we do get to prepare for it. And with performances, there's times where it's, an audition or something like that, but you should have prepared.
Yeah.
Right. It should be something where, unless you're doing the improv, right? Yeah. Where it's, but even then, you get some skills out of that.
Yeah, even that's a practice. So in improv is an actual practice where you practice being good at going off the cuff, saying things, I give you something and then remember, I think we were driving somewhere or we were doing something and I can't remember. And I was referencing like, okay, we're just going to improv. And instead of you saying no, you're going to say yes to everything. And you were like, no. And then I remember being like, okay, first of all, you're not being very good at this. Practicing that. And that's going to be my driving point, per the end of this episode, is that practicing the way you perform is going to be so important, but then also introducing the new stylistic nuances for your voice. So if I am not a dynamic speaker and I were to say, okay, I have to speak to a lot of people a lot of the time, if I were to just be a monotone speaker, I would lose majority of my audience, period. Right. Now, the fun part is I've worked with little kids a lot. And I know that changing my voice, almost every single phrase helps them stay actively engaged. So if I'm speaking to you and my voice will go down here, and then my voice comes up here, and then I go back down here again, majority of the time they stay with you. And I've found that doing that with adults now, because of the social media attention span, it actually is very helpful. So Harry, my son, he will do this thing. He did it. We just came back from Reno and Lake Tahoe, and we're actually headed to Santa Barbara tonight. But he says the end of the word as you're speaking. So I'll say, well, you'll know, but like it's kind of like the open, doorway. And he'll say doorway. And I'm like, don't say doorway right after. Oh, you got to know I'm listening to you, right? So those types of things, we do the, relative plug into practice, making sure your audience is not lost. You're still with your audience. As someone who is actively going out and choosing, okay, this is your new practice now, whether you like it or not, you and Bobby are out there and you are slinging information about emergency preparedness, risk mitigation, all the things. Do you think that there is anything necessary to be entertaining while you are speaking? Do you think that there is a focus on entertainment at all in sharing your message?
Yeah, I do. I think that when it comes to the showtime part of any public speaking, you have to be able to read the room, right? So what reading the room should give you is some immediate feedback as to, can I be funny right now? Is humor appropriate or is it inappropriate for this particular audience? Generally, I think that there are more times where it is appropriate within, boundaries than it is not. It makes it entertaining and it generally is somewhat engaging to the audience. But it depends on how much gravity is there in what you're saying, or is there in the topic that you're presenting on. Right. And then another thing that is funny that you bring up, Bobby and I, because we have some different styles,
you do.
But going off on tangents, there are times to go off on tangents and there are times to rein those tangents in.
I'm Bobby.
and continue on. Yeah, I love Bobby to death. One of my very best friends in the whole world. And I tell you what, that guy can tell a story.
I know
he
he's
is
so
one
good.
of the best storytellers. And it's funny, speaking of going off on tangents, here I am going off on one. You can always tell it's going to be a good one because he'll say, "Oh, hey," and then he goes, and he laughs at his own story before he starts telling the story. And that's when, my buddies and I all know, like, Bobby's got a good story.
It's happening.
It's coming in hot. And we like this.
I love that when we were in Grenada and then he tells it and he says the detail and he says, "You know what? I actually don't know I don't remember if that's a real thing or not, or if I made that part up." But anyway, and then he keeps on going.
Yeah, there are a number of times where we've walked out of presentations and he's given an example. And he's like, "Yeah, I made that up right there." And I was like, "Well, it worked. It sounded really, really good." So he's an awesome guy.
Yeah, I think that's the important thing to know is that, someone who does work with performers, someone who does focus on the aspect of how your voice works as a mechanism, how you sound when you're presenting your information. I'm deeply passionate about doing that with people. I really even hope the next group of my clients is this kind of group of people who are jumping in and saying, "Hey, I'm a new coach or I'm a new public speaker and I want to know how to use my voice." People ask me all the time, "Can you train your voice? Can you learn to sing?" The answer is yes. It's a muscle. You work out all the time. You have lots of muscles. You look fantastic. So it's one of those things that the voice is a muscle. And when you are learning to use it, that in and out, the breathing, the practice, again, those nuances. If you close your mouth more often than not, if you mumble when you talk, if you have a tendency to over-enunciate to where you put your S's and your T's and your hard D's, all of those nuances change, again, how the message is received. And as the medium, I think it is our job to make sure we are as clear as possible.
Boiling it down to probably the message of the podcast is do what you need to do to, understand what the route is to get better. Dedicate yourself to going and doing those hard and uncomfortable things. And then find somebody like yourself that can help coach you through that stuff.
Right.
You will get better, especially if you have that immediate feedback of a coach, somebody who's informed, somebody who's knowledgeable on not just the topics, but the actual techniques of making yourself better.
Yeah. And how to sustain the voice and how to feel connected to your audience. I mean, I remember I was speaking to this group of foster boys actually, and called to tell my story. And I had a strong speech prepared. Like, this was my childhood and this is my credibility at understanding you. And I had it all on my computer and right in front of me. And I looked at them and I'm reading from my computer and I realized they're not paying attention to me at all. And then I closed my computer and I started having a conversation with them. And I realized that in that moment, me as the speaker, me as the person with the microphone, it was more important for me to share my message in an appropriate way that suited them instead of something that suited me.
Right.
And that, for me, I think is probably the greatest takeaway in public speaking, that our social conditions, our social circumstances will change. If we can adapt with those changes, we will be more successful. We have a greater chance of success and a greater chance of meeting people that we are truly impacting, truly changing their lives, feel more connected to us in the moment, as opposed to, yes, I went and talked about my business today, but it's like, how many people did you impact? How many lives did you actually change? And those are I think probably the greatest takeaways for me anytime I'm listening to a public speaker. What are some of your most important takeaways?
Kind of building on what you were just talking about, the emotional intelligence side of that, right? Being able to, I said read the room earlier, but really that's emotional intelligence in a nutshell is knowing how I feel and knowing, what's going on within me and what my intentions are. Being able to recognize how you feel, the circumstances and the environment that you find yourself, and being able to appropriately navigate the environment in between, right? So like you said, that with that particular group, they were not receiving, right? They were more interested in what they were doing. So you had to change your navigation method.
Yeah.
And that's, I think, important for any performer, but it's especially important in public speaking. If you're trying to connect to your audience, there's less opportunity for that if you're speaking in front of a conference, right? Where there's 1,000 people out there and half of them are on their phones and, a third of them are asleep,
Right.
And they're just there because they're being paid to be there, or they're, marginally interested in, you or the speaker before you or the speaker after you, whatever. Right. So, that opportunity to connect is, it's a little different depending on your audience, but being able to read your audience, being able to prepare and understand when you're setting your goal for that particular speaking engagement, what it is that they expect of you. It's important. That's where it all starts. You start with that goal and that end state in mind, right? I want to come across as knowledgeable, dynamic, and informed on this particular topic. And then you just kind of reverse engineer it from there.
Right.
And then you practice it. You get help with that practice if you need the help, or, somebody like yourself that you're coaching them up through those techniques and that practice, that makes it even more efficient.
Yeah, absolutely. And I really go off of like 3 words, and we can wrap this up. So in our final, I want to come across confident, genuine, and engaging. And depending on the room that I'm in, sometimes I will say, I need to come across light, happy, and fun. I need to come across, and I select 3 words that I think, you know what? I want to focus on these words and more or less embodying that. So the focus on those things actually helps me maintain that emotional state of, well, I'm being genuine, I'm being engaging, I'm being authentic, I'm being light, happy, fun. And that is probably for me the easiest way to set the stage for my brain, for my voice, and knowing that my microphone is an appendage. So if I hold my microphone, my mouth moves to the right, I move my microphone and my hand to the right. And that is so important for me if I'm doing final takeaways right now. I don't know if you noticed. Did I tell you that already?
You did.
Okay, cool.
You did. I really like the 3 words. I do it slightly different, but when I'm at this point where I work, there's a lot of opportunity for coaching newer folks, a lot of people that are going through promotional processes and things like that. And they generally do an opening, right? And then they answer some questions, and then they do a closing statement for their particular section of the interview. And those 3 words, I tell each of them that come to me and ask for guidance, right? Come up with 3 things, descriptive words on how you want to come across, right? And that I don't break it down exactly like you did, how I want the conversation to come across, but because they don't know what the questions are going to be, and they don't know, they know in general what the topic is, with leadership and experience and that sort of thing, but they don't know what the questions are going to be. So I tell them, like, you need to get your character across. So think of 3 things that are going to define your character, and summarize it into 3 things, that are appropriate for this particular promotion, and tailor your answers to go through those 3 things. So if it's professional, innovative, and humble, right? Those I think are, some pretty standard ones for my line of work. Tailor your answers in that capacity, right? So as you're explaining experiences, or you're explaining your perspective on the thing, or your answer to whatever it is, what would a professional do? What would somebody with humility say? What would somebody who is innovative attack this problem, right? And then if they're thinking of those 3 things, then they're going to give a fairly good answer, right? So, or at least one that's going to hopefully convey their character.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I think it keeps the mind focused on that. And I think anytime you can actually see that, like, eye on the prize kind of vision and version of, okay, that's my focus. This is what I'm focused on. This is my version of achievement, regardless, because I maintain my focus. Anything else you want to add?
Final. Yeah. Like I said, there's nothing really to add, but just to summarize, again, I see it a little bit different than just the way a performer would. I think the way a performer would see public speaking has so much more flexibility, and it's so much more elastic than the way that I look at it. I look at it like standing in front of a room and talking to a group of people, and trying to get those people to build their intrinsic motivation, through your words, so that they will, their hearts will want to follow and go do the thing that we're needing to go get done. But that's, military and law enforcement, those are the type of things that are most frequent, right? The type of conversations and public speaking engagements. Some of the things that would reign true no matter what is to find your end state, right? Know what it is that you want out of a particular thing, right? A speaking engagement, an audition, or a performance, or whatever. Identify those things. think of what it is that you're good at, think of what it is that you're not good at, and how you're going to get good at the things, or mitigate how bad you are at those things or how good you're not at those things, and work your way through it, perform, get better. Constant improvement should be everybody's intent. And even if it's not 100% improvement, it's a little bit here, it's a little bit there. And, progress isn't linear. Yeah. So sometimes you'll get a home run out of a particular speaking engagement. And the next time you kind of trip and fail and, don't do quite the same job that you did the previous time.
Right.
And that's okay. Right. Just understand that whatever it is, I'm going to get better next time. I'm going to go back and I'm going to look at what I didn't do well. I'm going to look at what I did do well. And I'm going to look at how I prepared or how I defined my goal or my end state. And I'm going to do a better job next time, or a more appropriate job or whatever it is. And if you get so good that you are just knocking out every time, then turn around and help somebody else.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, my brain, it's so funny because my brain will always think if you're like the Madonna of like public speaking, or if you're like the Anna Nicole Smith of public speaking,
I don't know who those people are.
I'm going to street fight you. My takeaways are really going to be this. It's if you know you need help on something, get help, hire a coach, reach out. And it's not getting help from your friends. It's not asking your mom. It's not asking your dad. It's, it's really truly going to a professional saying, hey, this is what I want to do. I want to take myself seriously, and deciding, hey, I have these things to work on, knowing, hey, I'm going to listen back and hear some things I need to change. And then you actually plug in to someone who can help you change those things. Or you're running around there thinking, hey, I have this amazing message. In the meantime, sounding like a rabid badger or friggin' garbage pail kid, and your message is all over the board, and then you get highly discouraged, and then you don't even want to do the thing anymore because you don't get great results or great feedback. So to save yourself, I guess, all in all, obviously, just get a coach. Always hire me if you want.
Right. You're the best.
That's what I say, babe. Thank you so much, my love. Now we're going to go to Santa Barbara and golf all the golf courses and do the things and the hey-hey-heys and...
Yeah. If we ever get there, we might even be able to get dinner.
Calm down, crazy. Okay. All right. Well, thank you so much for listening. My beautiful performers, first and foremost, take care, be well, and go out there and be seen. Thanks so much. If you enjoyed today's show and don't want to worry about missing an episode, you can follow the show wherever you listen to your podcast. And if you haven't already, I would really appreciate if you could share the podcast with others who you think would benefit from it. And leave a rating and review to let me know what you think. Now, it doesn't have to be a 5-star rating, although I sure hope you love the show. I want your honest feedback so I can create an awesome podcast that provides tons of value. Visit amyadamscoaching.com/podcast launch for step-by-step instructions on how to follow, rate, and review. Thank you for listening to today's episode of The Confident Performer. If you want to learn more about living your truth and showing up as your most authentic, beautiful self, visit www.amyadamscoaching.com. See you next week.